Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and joining us today. So we have some guests trickling in, Karina, which they will just do on their own because it's webinar format.
Okay,
Um, if you're ready, we can get started.
sure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Karina, for being here today. And thank you for the guests. We're excited to have you and to have this conversation about kind of your life while you were a student at Marlborough, but of course, mainly since graduating Marlborough. For those of you who don't know Carina, she graduated from Marlborough in with the class of 76, and she was born in
Um,
LA to a multicultural international family. She was raised between California and Mexico. Um, and she's traveled extensively. She got her BA in International Relations from USC and then completed the Cornell School of Hotel and Administration. She's lived in Rome for many years. She started a nonprofit. She's worked in the hospitality industry and in entertainment. And so there's a lot that we're going to get into today and cover, which I'm really looking forward to. But first, Karina, I'd like to start with your time at Marlborough. What was that experience like? What were you interested in? What were some extracurriculars you took part in? If you could just kind of take us through that, that would be great.
well, first of all, hi to everybody. It's nighttime here where I am. I'm in Rome, and I'm happy to join you. It's a lot of fun. Well, let's see. I made a few little notes just because I'm a little jet lagged, and in case I would sort of forget. So if my eyes go a little that way, it's because I. But no, I mean, basically, I came to Marlborough in seventh grade, and that was a good thing because I came in with all the girls. But I had been at Beverly Hills Catholic School before and at the Lycée Français, and so lived in a different part of town. So I didn't know anyone at all when I came to Marlborough, and so it was a really different environment for me. But it was really clear that my mother and father wanted me to be in a more rigorous academic environment, and um, and also not at Beverly High later. So Marlborough was really very, very much a clear destination, and so when I got in, it felt like, I mean, I don't know. I remember feeling like, oh, wow, okay, this is, I mean, I didn't know anything about any of those things, but it felt important. And I was sort of fairly shy. And so uh, being in an all-girls school was probably good for me, though, because I had two brothers growing up, and well, I still have two brothers. And it was special in a way to be in an environment, that um, to be in an environment with all women or girls as we were. Um, I think that I had felt very smart before I came to Marlborough, and I had always gotten really good grades. But when I got to Marlborough, I suddenly felt that things were a little harder, and so that was interesting. It really, right away, I had the sense of having to up my game and really focus. But at the same time, even in seventh grade, somehow it was structured even then, way back when, to give the students a little bit more freedom of movement than I had been used to in an academic environment. And I think that was kind of fun and exciting. And you had asked me at some point what classes I liked and what extracurriculars I liked. And I'm looking at you over there, but you're over here, I suppose. and I really loved history and English, and of course, um, it was really fun though to do the courses that were the extracurriculars that were like jewelry making was something that was offered at one point, and I don't know if it's still a thing, but I really loved that a lot, and pottery. I was not at all a kind of athletic person. I was a horseback rider. So at Marlborough, I mean, I really, really did not like the athletic, having to swim. We used to have to swim in the mornings, and I mean, it was really so I really tried everything to not do those things. But of course, we did them, and we'd run around the field, all those things, gymnastics. But I was really brought, I went back because of some of your questions to remember those days and to think about it. And I realized, I was the least likely person, I think, in my mind to like gymnastics or something like that. I was not into competitive, like a team sports, just because I don't know why. I was always more of a sort of horseback rider, skier, sort of an um,
Yeah.
how would you say, sort of not in a team environment,
Yeah.
wasn't raised in that way. But when I did start to do that and I couldn't somehow get out of it, I ended up really liking it. And all of that was really due to the coach. As things usually are, the teacher or the coach very often influences what you end up liking
Hmm.
or feeling good at because you're somehow nurtured. And she really nurtured me. I think her name was Coach Hooker. I'm not sure. Uh, It was so long ago. Maybe if there's anyone on here from my class. Um,
Yeah, there are.
but she was very kind, and somehow I did okay in that, and which was a surprise. And
Yeah.
then the one of the other, you asked me what did I like the most, and one of the other things that I did was somehow I always played guitar and sang, and I still love to sing, but somehow somebody asked me, or somehow I got asked to sing or to play guitar and sing in the Monday assemblies, or these assemblies that would happen. I think they were on Mondays, and with Jane Bassett, who was a one of my classmates, and she also played guitar and sang. So somehow she and uh, I don't remember how often we did it, but I have a memory that we had to do it, every so often. And it was an unlikely thing for a sort of shy person to want to do, it was fun, and I did it with her, and I that was something that I really remember somehow getting up and having to do. But
That's
I
so
did have
nice.
a unique situation at Marlborough because in ninth grade, my mother passed. And so, it, in 10th, when I got back, and it was in the summer of ninth grade. So in 10th grade, when I got there, I think I had really retreated quite a bit emotionally. And one of the most memorable things I think about being at Marlborough was, I think, really how kind everybody was without making me feel too strange, about it. I'm pretty sure I was the only one. And I remember that. I don't know what it could have been like in another school environment, but
Hmm.
I do feel that that environment, um, helped me in that difficult time a lot. And the teachers, some of them reached out, but privately, and tried to be very supportive, And so that was something I always remember, you know.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a very supportive environment, which is great. It sounds like there were a lot of positives in moving schools for you, and finding your community here. When you were applying for college and kind of getting ready to move on from Marlborough, what did you envision for yourself? What did you kind of think the next 4 years, the next 10 years would bring for you? Did you have like an idea of a career path you had already, or were you just kind of focused on going to college first? I'm just, knowing where you are now, I'm just curious where you thought you were going to be.
I mean, I had no idea. And honestly, in 11th grade, I went away to school for a year to Switzerland. And I followed a cousin of mine who was going there. And so I went. And I didn't have a traditional senior year because uh, um, I asked and applied to exchange my 12th grade year for my first year in college. Somehow I got that idea while I was away at school, and somehow everybody agreed. Everybody, meaning my dad, the school, the college. And I think that's one thing I would never do again in that way. And it felt probably in those days like I was being very, assertive and taking charge and showing, my, I don't know, my potential as wanting to move forward or whatever, how people looked at it in those days. But honestly, I would never do that again. I'm sorry that I missed that 12th grade year when everybody was applying to colleges and doing 12th grade kind of things and having the 12th grade privileges and um, actually knowing what going into college really was about. Because coming from Europe, um, coming back from Europe where nobody was really talking about those things in the same way, I you know, I was I was a little bit in left field, and my dad really very much wanted me to go to USC because he had gone there, and so I ended up there, at USC, even though I had this dream of going to a place which I had heard and about and so on, which was Georgetown University. I really had wanted to go there because I understood it was School of Foreign Relations. In those days, probably it was more, or foreign study or international relations. And I think that was, if anything, that I had in my mind was possibly that I wanted to go into something related to foreign relations or diplomacy or travel but
Oh, interesting.
yeah, but my dad definitely wanted me to stay in LA and go to USC. So I did study international relations, but it was so I didn't have the same experience as probably the other seniors applying to schools.
Yeah, definitely very unique. It's funny, my friend actually did a year in Switzerland for her first year of college and then went to USC. So she still did her senior year, but she kind of was 1 year behind
Yeah,
you.
that might have been a better way to go back. Yeah.
So you stayed in LA, you studied international relations like you had wanted, but then you still ended up going to Cornell doing hospitality. Like, it sounds like from your bio that your family was involved in the hospitality world through the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. Um, so what transition, like what led to that transition from international relations, being interested in that to now kind of following in your family's footsteps and staying in the hospitality world?
I mean, I think that by the time I went to college and I started working, um, I got little jobs here and there. I mean, Bullock's Wilshire, which was a shop then, Bonwit Tellers, and this and that. But eventually, after school, and eventually I started working at the hotel. And my dad didn't want me to do that. Somehow, he really very much wanted me to be a lawyer or a banker or something. He didn't want me to go into the hotel business, thinking that it was, a hugely time-consuming business. It's a almost 24/7 kind of business in those days anyway, the way he ran the Beverly Wilshire Hotel and the way I was raised, seeing him run it, and my mother too. So, but in college, when I started working at the hotel, I think I just was a natural and organic move for me. And I wanted to learn about it. And obviously, I already knew quite a bit just being raised around the hotel. And we were actually living in the hotel after I came back from Switzerland. So working in the back of the house and in, room service and housekeeping and purchasing and different jobs. Eventually, I worked at the front desk, and after I finished at SC, I worked for a year full time at the front desk, and a lot of interesting and fun experiences that could, fit into the international category, international relations kind of category in a different way. But Cornell program, actually, I went to the Cornell Hotel Executive Program, which wasn't the Cornell Hotel School, a master's program or undergraduate program. It was a program where you had to be sponsored by a hotel company and only hotel professionals could go. So I convinced my father to have the hotel sponsor me. And I was definitely the youngest person at this, professional program. But I met a lot of people that later, as I got into the hotel business and moved to New York, that I, was friends with. A lot of them they were all from, well, many were from sort of five-star hotel backgrounds, people that hadn't gone to business school or hotel school before, and were all service-oriented people, and so wanted to have more of that background. So I went twice, 2 different summers, and it was a certificate program. So I did that. Yeah,
Oh,
in between.
nice.
Yeah, I mean, in between, I went away for a year or two to Germany when I was at USC. So I don't know.
Well, I feel like it's definitely relatable to have those experiences that kind like just like a summer job that organically leads to, a genuine passion for what you're doing and also something that very organically comes to you and that you're good at, that you might not have expected or, intended on doing. So I love that. And I'm curious now, once you ended up in New York, still working in the hospitality industry, a little bit in your bio says that you recognized doing some events, working in hospitality, and then recognizing this like gap between the hospitality industry and sustainability that led you to the establishment of Crescentera. Can you walk us through kind of how that came to be?
Well, let's see. I mean, I had several different jobs in the hospitality industry. Um, and I was very, very much on that track of hotel management. I, by the time I left Los Angeles and having been at the Beverly Wilshire working in different jobs, I definitely felt that that was, my career path. And so I moved to New York to specifically work in another hotel. So I could be, I thought, taken seriously in the hotel business, not working always in our family hotel. And that was a whole adventure because there I had several job offers from people that my father actually had helped set up for me, and that was kind of um, unsatisfactory situation for me because I went and I felt this was a kind of favor oriented, and it put me very much in the kind of, as they say now, the Nepo baby category. They were very much. So I met someone who then became a mentor to me in the hotel business through doing PR for our hotel. He was a writer and a critic and a restaurateur, an extraordinary person in the hospitality industry. His name was George Lang, and he owned a famous restaurant called the Café des Artistes. But I met him to help him with excuse me, an article he was writing about the hotel. We got to know each other, and he suggested that I should just go and apply at a hotel, not anywhere that knew me or anything. So he said, you should definitely work at the Waldorf Astoria. And so I did. And when I went there, I applied, and sort of almost immediately they offered me a job running something called the International Service Desk, which they had decided they would start. They decided that like a week before or something. And I just showed up and walked in, and the HR manager, came out and said, well, wait a minute. So how is it that you have all this hotel experience? I mean, you're pretty young, and that's really unusual. And I really, really did not want him to. There was no Google then. I mean, people didn't figure things out quite as quickly. He couldn't really just like look me up. So I don't know, said this and that, and he said, hey, you speak all these languages, and I definitely got the job because of the languages and because he saw this hotel experience. But it took him only a couple of days, and he kind of figured it out. He sleuthed around somehow, and I think my address probably gave it away because I had to put my address in. My address was the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. So, I mean,
That's
but
amazing.
So, um, what was I going to say? So yeah, anyway, you had asked me if I had had, some mentors in my work. That was my first mentor, let's say, besides my father and my mother, who were definitely my first mentors. My mother, because she did all the design for the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and a lot of what still exists now in the hotel was what she put there. The driveway as it
Wow,
exists, the gates, all the marble. A lot of it has been changed, but a lot of it is structural. So she designed the whole new wing, the wing on the side, and everything in the
that's
lobby.
amazing.
So, but yeah, I worked there at the Waldorf. Sorry, but what was the rest of the question was?
Oh, just how then your time in New York City, maybe working at the international, was it international guests?
International Service Desk. Yeah, in
International
charge.
service desk, and how it kind of led to Crescentera, basically. You said like your time in the hospitality industry is what kind of led you to that. So I'm curious, what were some
Yeah.
moments that led to it?
Well, yeah, there were definitely several jobs between the Waldorf and when Crescentera started. I would say like almost 10 years. A lot of
Oh,
different,
wow.
a
Yeah.
lot of different jobs. And I mean, Crescentera started, I think I would say, and specifically because you asked me about mentors, I would say that another person that I met in New York became a very important mentor to me around the time I was in my late 20s. I was already married by then. I had had several jobs. I lived in Washington, D.C. with a hotel company. I'd come back. I got married. And then I was running sorry, I have something. I was running a company making flatware and plates and china and things for high-end hotels and restaurants and a design firm. And a restaurateur friend said that we used to see a lot, who lived, had his restaurant near our place, said, there's someone you have to meet. You're going to love this man and his wife. They're just amazing. And they're interested in so many of the same things. We went to dinner and he turned out to be the dean of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which for those of you that don't know, I mean, maybe nobody knows because it's a very New York City thing, is a Episcopal cathedral, physically the second largest Gothic cathedral in the world, I think, after Notre Dame, and also still in the works, like still being built after I don't know how many hundreds of years. And he was known as the Green Dean. I mean, he was, as it turned out to be, he really opened my eyes a lot to things that I felt in my heart, some things I felt intuitively that I hadn't been able to articulate, that I felt were really important, and that maybe were starting to feel a little like contradictory in a way to the hotel business. And I became very interested in articulating, I think, my interest in environmental issues. And it was early on, so people weren't really talking about environmental issues. I mean, we're talking about the late 80s and beginning of the 90s. But I just had this feeling like hotel business. And I was starting to do, as well as working at Swid Powell, reading feasibility studies for high-end hotels with other hotel friends of mine that were looking for projects to get involved with. We were all very ambitious and looking at projects and things all the time. We were never just doing our one job somehow. And I have to say that I had already decided that in my career that I was going to be the first woman general manager in a hotel in New York.
Oh, wow.
Decided that while I was at the Waldorf. So everything I did were like steps to get there.
Right.
And I was eventually offered a job as general manager of a hotel called the Morgans Hotel Group. But I ended up turning it down because it was a long story, but it was a very colorful group. And they were the previous owners of Studio 54. And they had gotten out of jail. They had been in jail for tax evasion. But they had the most innovative concept for hotels and the first small boutique luxury hotel in New York. And I was very jazzed by that. I just thought, oh, wow, that's amazing. And through a search firm, a headhunter, um, who had always kind of been around my, sphere, they offered me that job, but I ended up turning it down. But so, I mean, a lot of things happened, and Crescentera, one of the things I became good at in the hotel business was through working in food and beverage and various things was organizing events. I mean, I was a banquet manager for a while at the Walder, and um, I also knew a lot of people in New York, and we were, I guess, fairly social at that time, my husband and I. And so the dean said to me one day, "Why don't you come up to the cathedral and invite, you know, like some of your friends for dinner?" And I said, "Well, how would that work? I mean, like, what do you mean, invite my friends for dinner at the cathedral?" He said, "Well, let's just have a dinner party at the cathedral, invite your friends." So I thought, "Yeah, well, okay, well, what do you mean, like 10 people or like 30 people?" He said, "I don't know, I'll leave it up to you." And sure enough, I don't know, it just became my first fundraiser that I did, the first fundraising event that I personally did, not that I was a banquet manager for or that, which is a very different experience, organizing it for another person who's in charge
Of
essentially, and you're
course,
just in
yeah.
charge of the service, than you being in charge of the whole vision, the
The
you
guest
know
list. Yeah.
guest list and the invitation, everything. But I did it, and it felt fairly natural, even though it was a lot of work because I was working at the same time and I was doing a lot of things. And so then I did one the next year for the cathedral. It was for their soup kitchen. It was to raise money for their soup kitchen and homeless shelter and after school programs. And I became really kind of passionate about that and about how they were organized. And he really opened my eyes to, different ways that you can help people that weren't so obvious. And that the ways they did it there at the cathedral, they were very kind of ahead of the curve in many ways. And I was excited by the fact that they had a shelter, for instance, where they kept everyone there until they were reestablished in the world. There was a men's shelter. They could only do it for like 14 people at a time, but it was unique in New York, and the soup kitchen was, I think, one of the largest in New York, and they had the most innovative after school program. So I got very passionate, and that's how I got involved with doing these things. It was just out of a passion for seeing a need and that I could do it. So I was doing a lot of these things for several years, mainly at the cathedral. And then at a certain moment, my life took a big change in every which way. And I had a kind of like identity crisis, I think, that and around my dad had also passed. And there was a lot in my life. I was going through a divorce, and then too, and after 10 years together and all of that too. So I was um I think, searching really for something that was more meaningful to me,
Hmm. Yeah.
and suddenly it felt like, and my dad sold the hotel before he died, right before he died, like 2 months before. So suddenly, I guess I hadn't realized how tied, it seems obvious, right? Probably to everybody that the Beverly Wilshire would be tied to me working in the hotel business. But to me, the hotel business was my life. But I didn't realize how much the fact that then the Beverly Wilshire wasn't in my life anymore
Right.
was tied to me being interested in that world or that field. And so suddenly I didn't really care how many towels people got or how their, shoes were polished or if they had been greeted correctly. Suddenly I just really, really wanted to fill these needs or help fill these needs. And somehow I saw that I could do it, and I could get people interested and engaged. And knowing people in the hotel business helped a lot because I got a lot of chefs involved in doing
Oh,
events.
cool.
I got other hotel managers, and in those days, restaurants and hotels didn't do nonprofit work. It didn't exist. And but when you would approach them, and tell them something that resonated with them, then they also felt yeah, I can participate in that. I mean, they didn't want to be in charge or anything, but they could participate. So I did several events like that, most of them at the cathedral, and the dean just let me do whatever. And these were all voluntary events. I mean, so, but eventually a friend of mine said to me, look, if you're doing all of this, and then, I left my job at Swid Powell, and so sort of took some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And she suggested maybe you should just start a nonprofit because you're doing all these kinds of things anyway. And I had, received some money at the time from my dad, and I was young, and she said, you're kind of, giving giving away a lot of money. So you should maybe get other people to also, participate with you. And there's such
Yeah.
a asking for grants and matching grants and
Right.
all of this. So she was a financial planner, a friend who was a financial planner. And she really advised me to do it. So I started this uh, as a way to I didn't even really know. It just seemed like a good idea at the time as a structure in which to you know do this kind of work, and in which I could ask for other grants and from individuals or from other foundations and so on. So that's how it really started, and then yeah, and then I did, I guess, the first really huge event after Crescentera was founded, which was already in '93. It's kind of crazy to think it was so long ago. But, and it was a big event at the UN because I had gotten involved with a lot of social justice issues and sort of human rights as well as environmental issues. And it's all tied. All of that was tied. I think people know that now, but at the time it was kind of not spoken of in that way. But I met with the dean, several Native elders that were so amazing and so opened my eyes to so much that was needed in the world, not just in their world, but in the world. So I a lot of my first projects with Crescentera were related to Native American issues, environmental issues. You know, it was all mixed, but eventually, um, Crescentera was um, it's called a private operating foundation. And so, with the private operating foundation, for any of those of you who are interested in nonprofit activity, if you don't know that, there are there's public foundations, private operating foundations. There's several types of foundations. And usually private operating foundations are funded privately, which mine was at first, which was why my friend was trying to help me and protect me a little bit. And but it means you also had more leeway in a way to do what you wanted. And I
Yeah.
fairly early on saw that what I really wanted to do was produce events, produce conferences, film different things. So I really made Crescentera um, as a nonprofit. People always assume that you're, going to give away a lot of money. So if you call it Crescentera Foundation,
Mhm.
I realized very quickly that, people assumed they could apply to you for funds. So it was officially a foundation, but it was as a private operating foundation, it became a nonprofit production company. That's
Okay.
how I sort of incorporated it. And I, specifically, I didn't have a website. I mean, we didn't have websites in the beginning then, but in materials or whatever, I specifically said that I wasn't open to receiving requests for funding, or that I was producing. Crescentera was producing its own events, and
Right.
so that was what I did. I think
Mm.
that there was so much to learn about nonprofits um, that was harder to learn in those days than now. There's a lot of material out there, a lot of blogs, a lot of websites, a lot of books, the courses you can take, in those days, I just, talked to a few people. I went to a lawyer who helped me set it up. And then I only learned a few of the things you're definitely not supposed to do, and some of the things you're definitely supposed to do, like have a mission. And you're definitely, supposed to keep track of everything. And early on, I learned in nonprofit world that it was almost, you know, you know, form over function in a way. You had to really keep everything very documented, and wasn't like completely the best at that. But I did so many events and so on, and I had a lot of video material. I had a lot of material on all the events, and so um, I think if I were to do it again, I might have created just my own production company in a way, and then worked with the nonprofits rather than doing it the other way around. But I think it was because my heart was so much engaged in it that I was, kind of being maybe overly generous in the beginning. So then um, I think that's how it happened, that I created that it was created. Um,
That's really interesting. I like that, that hindsight of how you would have maybe done it differently, but you're still able to ultimately, produce the events that you want and work with nonprofits in the way that you want. But um, yeah, I'm sure setting up that structure was complicated. And it's nice that you had people around you who were able to advise you and, make sure that you were protected in that process while you were just doing something, that you were like so driven to do. I can imagine hard to like pause and focus on the like minutia and those
I
details that
definitely
can
didn't,
really bog you down.
So every once in a while, an accountant or someone would say, "Wait, what? What is this?" And I don't know. I was really, really mission driven, let's
Right.
say, which is what nonprofits are
Right.
versus which has a different emphasis. And nonprofits really are that. It's mission driven.
Mhm.
And um, I think that what interests me a lot now, and why I went and got a master's degree last year here in Rome at the an arts and culture management master's at this late stage. So for all of you out there, there's still time for doing everything. uh, I was definitely the oldest person in the course, but since a lot of it was on Zoom because it started sort of, after COVID, I didn't have to engage like too much. Everybody was, sort of my daughter's age, but not that's not quite true. There were people from all over the world that were also professionals in all different fields. So it was very, very interesting, mainly because it was focusing on management, so business, and it wasn't about the nonprofit sector. It was about management. So I realized that I knew a lot of what they were talking about in arts and culture management because I've run a center for the arts. I've produced a lot of events in the arts, but it was important for me to almost learn to hear what I know, to see what I knew. Do you know, like to have a baseline to figure out what I already knew, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
people speak of those same things now, as younger generations, how they speak of the same things that I would just take for granted as things I just did in different terms and in more important terms, and the way things are described and so on. So I was so intrigued, but I really did it because I started trying to find ways in which the nonprofit world and the for-profit world could merge more, and maybe not merge technically, certainly not legally. That would be tax wise and no, let's say, but merge in the sense of I think that when I ran in San Diego, um, when I moved there in 2010, 2003, 2004. So around 2007, I got very involved with the Center for the Arts there, the California Center for the Arts. And eventually I became board chair and again, another nonprofit. And then, but I became interim CEO because we took it through a turnaround. So I took it through a 3-year turnaround, which made my former husband, who was a business guy, we're still really good friends, but he's a turnaround expert. That made him laugh a lot that I was taking a business through a turnaround, but it was very, very natural to me. I really knew and felt that I understood what it had to do. And a lot of what that nonprofit, that performing arts organization had to do were things that I think came from the business world, from the hotel business, from
Mm-hmm.
not just the service element that was missing there, but just the mentality of finding a way to create programs that would fund themselves and not just constantly looking for people to fund the programs from outside, but finding ways. And at the Art Center, there were ways you could do it. I mean, there's ticket sales, there are, well, mainly it's ticket sales. Then there was a conference center. And so that was a natural for me because that was where, there were parties, events. So I knew how that business ran. And that business was not nonprofit for the Art Center. And it funded a lot of the programs. So I thought, well, that's a really great model. It would happen by complete chance, I think, there. And it was a unique and unusual thing. But I thought, this is why not nonprofits should do somehow structure themselves more that way to become more sustainable. It's just very challenging to constantly be looking for money from outside, to constantly be there's a lot of burnout in the nonprofit sector. People have good intentions and mean so well and usually get involved in that arena because of believing in what they're doing. And
Right.
the fact that there's often no funding and things start to close and there's always these waves of losing programs, then you get more, funding, then you have to start new programs again.
Yeah, it's
It's
cyclical.
very, very challenging. And so I guess now I've been in this, I'm not sure where this is all going to go, but very much of the mindset that nonprofits could learn a lot from the for-profit world and vice versa.
Absolutely. I actually got my master's in social entrepreneurship, where basically the entire degree was focused on for-profit businesses with a social mission. So it's
Hmm.
kind of exactly what you're talking about. And it was always very interesting to me to think about it differently, the same way you also thought about establishing your nonprofit differently as like a private foundation, but it's still a nonprofit. I think there's a lot of different ways, and people that are driven by something they really care about, the way you were, just kind of assume, oh, I just have to establish a nonprofit and constantly be fundraising all year long, all the time in order to survive. But there are so many different ways to, achieve your goals and, provide these like social services and all these things that you want to do and not have to be so heavily reliant on receiving these donations. So that's amazing. And that sounds like a great program, and also just like this great connection that you've made through your experiences. I'd love to know kind of what one of your favorite projects was to date, and then also what the future holds for Crescentera. Like, what are you planning? What are you kind of looking forward to coming up?
Well, I'd say the very first uh, pretty large scale conference that I organized at the UN in New York was called the Cry of the Earth. And it was a 3-day event, bringing native elders, is very pretty esoteric for the UN, I would say, even now probably. But it was bringing native elders to the UN to speak about their prophecies about the earth. They have prophecies that have been in their, um, in their cultures for nobody even knows how long. Let's say it's just in there. And so I had heard about this through some other people, that there were these Hopis that were wanting to come to the UN to speak about their prophecies. And that was one of their prophecies, like that they had to come to the UN to speak. And I thought, why could that possibly be so hard? I somehow met this Hopi that was the designated one to go around and try to get this done. I met him at a UN conference, at another UN conference. And I said, I would like to work on it and find a way to work on it. And he said, oh, yes, dear, it's nice. I'm sure a lot of people had tried. And somehow I had very clearly this vision of how it could happen. And it took about a year, I'd say, to do, but I did, and there were millions of twists and turns, just like in any production of any kind, or any big job of any kind, where you think it's not going to work and it's just not happening, and then all of a sudden it does work, and the pieces of the puzzle that you have to start with one little piece, and and you know usually when you don't know what to do, and if you're young and you're starting, you don't know what to do, I'd say the most important thing is just to start, because that's the hardest thing, is just you think, oh, I don't know, there's so much I don't know, and you just start, and it's amazing. I had never done a conference at the UN. I mean, I had certainly never done a conference about prophecies or anything like that, but it was I didn't know how much I didn't know, let's say, so that was helpful. but um,
Absolutely.
but I found out through this one and that one, well, the first thing you have to do is get this ambassador or an ambassador behind you. And then I thought, okay, I'll go to this one, I'll go to that one, I'll go to the Mexican ambassador first, because maybe I could convince him. And he told me, well, you have to go to the American ambassador first. And that was Madeleine Albright. And for anybody that knows who Madeleine Albright was, she was an incredible woman, but very tough lady. She did not want to hear about this for quite some time until. So she said, no, you have to go to the Canadians, because it was going to be a North American conference of elders. So, one thing led to the next, but then they told me, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. So I just followed the path, and somehow eventually all the pieces, came together. But yeah, you just start, and especially when you're young, and because I have, I don't know if they're young people watching, or if any of them are recent alums. I have the I'm in the situation where I'm around, several, 24-year-old, 25-year-olds, because my daughter is 24 and she's just graduated from college, and so on. So I see that there's a lot more, you can be a go-getter kind of person, but there are also a lot of more caution, so a lot of kids are a little more cautious than I think we were at our age, because people know so much now, and you know so much, so all the stuff that you don't know. Well, we didn't know what we didn't know, so we just went forward. So it's good and bad to know a lot. I mean,
Absolutely.
and the point really is that it is absolutely a time to experiment and to just do things, and to experiment. And it doesn't feel good to experiment and think you might fail at it, but you don't do it thinking you might fail. But experimentation, I would say, for anybody, especially for young people, I think feels unsafe sometimes. It feels like, but I don't know, there's no certainty that it will work. And you know what, there is absolutely zero certainty in anything, so you
Right.
just start, and and put one little piece in the puzzle and another little piece, like they say, the corner and the puzzles that we used to do when we were little, you start with the sky or whatever. There were puzzles pieces, and you start with the ones that you can start to put in, and slowly you build to
It'll
the.
all come together. Yeah,
And if it doesn't, well, it didn't, but it somehow leads you to the next thing. It always leads you to the next thing, so it's never
absolutely.
a loss. um, some things I've tried didn't work out, but maybe in the middle of it, somehow it led to the next thing. So anyway,
Right.
Crescentera was one of my favorite events because, it, it, and I would say the most recent projects, for some time, I wasn't really um, doing a lot with Crescentera because I also have other projects that I've done and that are, let's say, more on the more profitable side, that are mission driven, but more real estate oriented, like, renovating properties and selling, which I love doing. And I did that quite a lot in New York. And so that took some time. For a while, and then I had my daughter, and, then I ran the art center. So I was in a nonprofit world, but not specifically, Crescentera produced a big event there every year, but so I wasn't as focused that everything had to be, from Crescentera. But when I moved here, I got involved with organizing several events. And as it turned out, I was able to do them as an American here and such large scale events because I had this Crescentera website of these huge events that I had done. And because it was nonprofit, somehow it seemed they're not very nonprofit oriented here in Italy. It's just a new thing. They've
Yeah.
really done that mentality. And so it seemed not very, it wasn't challenging the system in a way, in the same way that if I came in and I was trying to do. So I was able to do some very large events here, because it seemed um, that it was, and it was, they were all for good cause, but let's say they're more skeptical here about things being for good causes. But one thing led to the next, and I started working with an American director who uh, was doing this film project, and I had worked with him a little bit before, but he started spending time in Europe again, in Italy, and said, "Why don't you're here? Why don't maybe you want to help develop this project?" And it's a film called the Last Supper film, and he had this vision or this idea that he could work in tableaus and sort of vignettes to make this film. And so one of the first ones was um, the Last Supper, the living tableau, meaning it was a recreation of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper painting, fresco, which is in Milan in a church. And we filmed it, but with people and not speaking, and but it's just as if you're seeing the painting, and in very slow motion, it's as if this painting is coming alive. So it's we when I saw what was happening and how artful it was and how extremely beautiful it was, we were really lucky to be able to work with three very well-known Italian cinematographer and set designer and set decorator. That were very, very famous here. But when I saw how beautiful it was, and it wasn't even finished, the editing or anything, it's 9 minutes long. So as a vignette, I mean, they're like short sequences, and the whole film will be like this. But I got interested in just this sequence, and I thought this has to be shown in a museum as a video installation. And that became a Crescentera project because it was going to be a thing, like a long-term thing. So I got an Academy of Arts to help, and his foundation and various other, and I went to a museum in Milan that was going to host the Last Supper tapestry from the Vatican. So I said, well, you're going to have the Last Supper tapestry, and maybe that we can combine. So long and short, that became an exhibit for 6 weeks in the Palazzo Reale Museum in Milan.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out to be the year of Leonardo da Vinci, which we didn't even know when we started this. So it became one of the official events for the Leonardo 500th anniversary in
Oh, wow.
Milan. So it became kind of a very
What an
meaningful.
epic. thing to be a part of, like in Italy. I think that's so amazing.
So that was one of my favorite. And no, we've done another tableau based on a Fra Angelico work. Crescentera, when you had asked me how it evolved, and it's evolved really with me because essentially it's like having your own production company. Uh, it's evolved with my passions and interests. So
Hmm.
um, it's not that I lost interest in anything at all. It's just somehow,
Yeah,
it's with this flow over all these years, which are now like, I don't know, 30 or something.
it's
Um,
amazing.
so
Um,
yes, it has evolved into more of an arts, um,
Focus.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Someone asked how many languages you speak and how fluent you are in each.
Well, I grew up speaking Spanish, so I'm fluent in Spanish and French. 'Cause I studied in Marlborough, French, and then I went to Switzerland. And because of Marlborough, they put me in the highest level of French because a French teacher wrote that I was so good at it that when I got to Switzerland, they put me in the highest level of French, and I really had to work hard to
Oh,
stay
wow.
in that program. But I learned French there, and then I learned German, which I've more or less forgotten, but now I speak Italian. So let's say we can put German on the side. So Italian, French,
So
Spanish.
four and English.
And I definitely think that, especially in California, it's a little maybe less, possibly, or in the United States, a little bit less of, you know, of a focus to learn languages than in Europe, because here everybody focuses now on speaking English as well as their own language and possibly
Mm,
another. But I would say, even though people study languages in school, it's maybe not in the United States as much of a complete focus, that you could also not, you know,
yeah.
learn
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely different at Marlborough now. I mean, when I was here, my Spanish class was taught in English. And then we would go,
Really?
we'd go through our Spanish textbooks and, of course, like have conversations and things like that. But the teacher was primarily speaking English. Now, in all the language classes, they're required to speak 90% in the language that they're teaching. So the kids are getting much more conversation practice than I ever did, which is really the thing that helps it stick, I think. And so it's changed a lot. And it makes me sad that like I took it for 6 years basically and still don't speak it
Yeah.
fluently. But and I have a
Weren't
husband from
you thinking,
Nicaragua. I should speak it fluently, but
oh, well, you have a
anyway,
translator built in, but it is hard to maintain languages as
yeah,
well. So even if you're raised speaking a language, strangely you can lose. So it's yet
right.
another thing that you have to maintain in your life. But
Absolutely.
I would say that speaking languages has probably been the most important thing in my life that has led me to assimilate in ways that I never would have been able to,
Yeah,
cultures, different cultures, or at least giving it a really good try, like I did in German. Um, and it also helps you understand cultures differently, not just understand what they're saying, but the way that the languages are structured and so on helps you understand
of course.
the
Yeah,
mentality of people in ways. And I just think languages are um, really, really, really critical, and even though everybody speaks English now around the world.
absolutely. I think it's so important. I agree. And I just wish they came more naturally to
There's
me.
still time, Natalie. You can
I
still
know.
still take. And now I just was learning about an app that's probably AI driven, I think it is, that has conversation with you. Um,
Oh yeah, actually I have it.
what's it
It's
called?
called like Makes You Fluent, I think, or what it could be. There could be many, but at least the one that I have called Makes
Another
You
one
Fluent.
I heard about. I haven't checked it out, but I thought, okay, well, that's a nice, use of AI. I have no idea what it sounds like, but
It's
that,
helpful. It's funny. My husband's heard the AI speak to me and they don't have a good accent. But when I speak back and it types it perfectly and they like correct it for me, it is great. It's a great like program that exists now. Um, but again, just with Spanish, there's different versions of it all over the world. Like Nicaraguan
Yeah.
Spanish versus Mexican versus from Spain. Like it's very, very different and the apps aren't quite there yet with all those differences, but
Yeah.
it's still, nice to have. Okay, so we have a few more comments in the chat from Carol Clove. It says, Karina, it's so wonderful to see you. You look fantastic. You've not changed a bit. Hugs, Carol Ann Clove. Norma Bowles said,
Hi,
yes,
Norma.
that cool coach was Nancy Hooker. And hi, Bella Ragazza, come visit. I'm gonna butcher this, Mile Baci, Norma.
I'll be back in about 2 months.
So great hearing how you moved into doing the fabulous work that you do. So thank you so much, Karina. This was truly so wonderful, just getting to know you better. And this recording will be available on Marlborough's website under the Alumni Aiming High page, for everybody to watch. And thank you so much. This was so great, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. I hope so too. And all of you girls that might listen to this at some point, or even my friends over there, keep learning languages and travel as much as you can in a sustainable.
In a sustainable way. Yes. Thank you, Karina. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of your day
Bye.
and a great
Bye.
night for you.
Bye.
Bye.